You're not here by chance. Something within you, something subtle yet powerful, led you to this video in this exact moment. And once you reach the end, you'll understand why this is not just another coincidence in your life. This is a calling from your inner self, a quiet nudge from your soul that has been guiding you without noise or spectacle, because transcending your old self is not a loud, dramatic transformation. It doesn't come with fireworks or grand declarations. It's something quiet, almost imperceptible, a silent journey that unfolds inwardly. It's not about becoming someone new with external changes. It's about shedding what never truly belonged to you in the first place. It's about remembering who you have always been at your core. This kind of transformation doesn't shout, it whispers. It feels like waking up one day and realizing you no longer belong to the identity you used to cling to. You no longer resonate with the same spaces, with the same conversations, or even with the same parts of yourself that once defined you. Carl Jung once said that true spiritual growth doesn't come from perfecting your personality. It comes from transcending it, letting go what is non-essential, all that was built as armor or illusion, to remember the essence of your soul, that quiet, unwavering truth that has always been within you. And one of the first signs of this shift is that you no longer identify with your past story. What once felt like a central part of your identity now feels distant, like watching an old movie. You can see it, even remember, but it doesn't define you anymore. There's no longer any need to reject it, nor do you feel a wave of nostalgia for it. You feel calm when you remember, because now you can observe your journey without feeling the urge to explain or justify it. You no longer tell your story from the wound. You don't define yourself by what you suffered or what you achieved. You know, it was all part of your path, but you also know with a deep, unshakable certainty that your worth is not measured by any of it. What happened no longer controls who you are or limits what you can become. And in the space once filled with guilt or pride, something new is born. A gentle freedom and TR that allows you to see your past for debarment what it truly is. The past, this NPR emotional distance, isn't about detachment. It's about integration. You don't need anyone to be on to understand your pain anymore. You don't seek validation for what you lived. You and no longer feel the urge to explain what made you who you are. You simply know your silence honors it. And that is enough. You begin to notice there are things that used to trigger you, that DBR unsons stirred something deep inside now. Now Bedian passed through you without leaving a scar. Words that once pierced you, now Bediar dissolve in your awareness. Relationships that once kept you anchored to outdated versions of Iriar, and yourself start to lose their grip, not because you're rejecting them, but because there's nothing left in you for ADBR, then them to hold on to as you transcend and beyond your old self. Your emotions stop and beyond dictating your reactions, not because NDR you disconnect from your feelings, but because you learn to discern what scent of you is responding from the present and beyond and Tianen, and what part is simply repeating Eddie or familiar patterns. Your inner narrative begins to shift. The thoughts you once MDR repeated for survival no longer play in your mind. You're no longer seeking your beta and redemption. You're not punishing NDR yourself for the person you used to be. You simply observe and move forward as MDR. If something within you knows that every chapter before this one was necessary to bring you here. That deep understanding to BRG does not come from the intellect. It's in BRE, comes from the soul. And it is in that deep awareness that your old self begins to wear and dissolve. Not because it vanishes, but beyond because you no longer live there. And a big when you stop inhabiting that old version of yourself. Something inside a BR and you becomes lighter. You don't forget a BR in what you lived. You simply no longer need it as your foundation. Your choices at DR begin to arise from a place that is NDR freer, clearer, more aligned with who NDR you truly are, not with the story you NTR used to tell about yourself, those BR self-defense that once felt so solid. This is just how I am, or I can't change NDR and begin to blur. Not because you fought makes them, but because they no longer BR make sense to the person you NDR and becoming. You no longer act out of a need to maintain a firm identity. You've realized your soul doesn't need labels to feel alive. Transcending your old self isn't about destroying it. It's about honoring what it once was and moving forward without dragging along what no longer serves you. You stop clinging to the persona you created to survive. You no longer feel the need to repeat emotional patterns or adjust yourself to fit into spaces you've outgrown. And the gentleness with which you let go, the ease with which you release without resistance, is the clearest sign that you are no longer vibrating from a conditioned self. You are beginning to live from your true self, the self that doesn't need to defend or prove anything, the self that simply is, and then something else happens. Your way of connecting with others begins to shift, and not because you planned it. It happens naturally. You start relating to others from a clearer, more honest, more unburdened place. You no longer seek in someone else what you've learned to give yourself. You don't look for a savior. You don't need to be seen to feel real. Your presence is no longer something you bargain with out of fear of being alone. In the past, your relationships were often built on need, on unspoken agreements rooted in pain, on unconscious emotional trade-offs. But now, there is space. Space to breathe, space to pause before reacting, space to observe without absorbing everything. When you transcend, you stop repeating the emotional patterns that once held you captive. Not because the world has changed, but because you are no longer making choices from your wounds. Your sensitivity no longer leads you blindly. Your giving no longer comes from emptiness. It arises from balance, and that changes everything. Your relationships stop being mirrors of what you lack and become reflections of what you already are. You no longer seek conversations to avoid silence or intimacy to escape yourself. You are finally able to share from a place of fullness, not from a sense of lack. And this is the essence of true transformation. When you no longer need to be anything other than what you are. When your past no longer defines you. When your emotions serve as messengers, not masters. When your story becomes a sacred memory instead of a living script. That's when you know you've begun to remember who you truly are. Even if someone doesn't resonate with you, there is no drama, there is no resentment or internal rupture, because your emotional stability no longer relies on someone else's willingness to stay. You now place your peace in someone else's hands, and that shift, that quiet, invisible shift, changes everything. When you begin to embody emotional independence, you discover a version of freedom that is not just liberating but grounding. You're no longer running away nor clinging. You're simply present. And that is enough. Your presence, once a background element of who you were, becomes your new language of love. A love that doesn't demand, that doesn't beg to be seen, that doesn't wait for reciprocity to feel real. It's a quieter love, deeper and more genuine. It doesn't scream through promises or perform affection to be validated. It simply is steady, congruent, and peaceful, not because it's trying to prove something, but because it doesn't need to. You begin to connect from a place of truth, not from a need to uphold an image or fulfill a role. You no longer invest energy in conversations that don't resonate, nor do you maintain relationships that exist only out of habit or history. Your energy, more refined and attuned, naturally filters out what doesn't align. And even if that process stings, it also brings relief. It brings clarity. Your old self used to choose from urgency, from fear of being left behind, from desperation to be accepted at any cost. But now you no longer choose that way because you've made peace with your own silence. You've learned to sit with it, to welcome it, like an old friend. You know that the company of someone who doesn't truly connect with you can feel lonelier than your own solitude, so you stay with yourself, even if that means walking away from what you once thought was love. You stop confusing intensity with truth and drama with depth. You begin to recognize that what brings peace is what art truly has roots. And what needs constant immediate tension to survive is often just a mask in honor for immediate disconnection. You no longer try to force understanding. You don't need to convince anyone of around your growth or justify why you can no and longer remain in spaces that stifle your TDR soul, your vibration, the energy you and BRN emit simply by being true to yourself. And BRN begins to speak louder than any words, and without meaning to, it triggers reactions in those who haven't yet crossed their own thresholds. Some will drift away, others will draw NDR near, but from a different place, from maybe beyond the honesty, not from need. And you will be bonded at peace with both, because your centered tent is no longer defined by your DBI relationships. Now, your center defines your relationships. In this new order, and beyond whatever stays, does so because it truly and beyond resonates, not because it is being forced to. This profound change in how DDR you relate to others quietly reshapes and beyond your entire reality. What once felt essential now, gently it dissolves, and this is not rejection. It's clarity. Clarity born from having explored your own darkness so thoroughly and bond that you no longer need to project it onto others. Your old self searched for DBR mirrors, people who would confirm your end of worth, who would fill your empty spaces with half presences and temporary comforts. But you are no longer DR10 available for that kind of bond. You've empowerment come to understand that a true NDR connection doesn't consume you, it expands you. It doesn't ask you to betray your essence. It invites you to be NDRs and live it more fully. And when you begin NDR to connect from this renewed energy, NDR everything changes. Connections become subtler, more honest, NDR and lighter. The strength of a bond NDRN longer lies in how loud or intense it NDRN is, but in its frequency. In that silent space where two souls can simply exist NDRN together without explanation, without a BRN rescue, without clinging. In this new state, you learn to set boundaries, not to be dardened from fear, but from love, self-love. And DBR said, these boundaries don't divide. They bring order. They organize your energy, NBR to your time, your eternal space. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to maintain what isn't growing with you. You don't stay out of fear of losing the little that's left. You've shifted into another vibration, one that doesn't apologize for evolving. You no longer feel the need to ask forgiveness for choosing your truth, and that in itself is proof that your old self is no longer the one guiding your relationships. Now it's your soul. And your soul only chooses what nourishes, what uplifts, what reminds you of who you truly are. From this place, you begin to understand the true purpose of companionship. Not to complete you, but to share who you've already become. You no longer seek shelter in others because you have become your own safe space, and this energetic self-sufficiency doesn't mean isolation. It means soul-level maturity. You stop carrying emotions that don't belong to you. You stop absorbing what others refuse to transform. You no longer fall into the trap of healing those who haven't chosen healing for themselves. You no longer dissolve in patterns where you once tried to be enough by becoming less of yourself. Because now you know, real love is not disguised sacrifice. It is presence without pressure, connection without chains, and it's within that clean, quiet connection that the most powerful things begin to unfold. You become a mirror of transformation for others, not because you intend to lead or guide them, but simply because your vibration reaches them. Your mere presence in a state of coherence starts to reveal the truths others have long avoided within themselves. Some will be thankful for this, while others may resist it. But either way, you remain at peace, because your connection is no longer born from duty or obligation. It's rooted in the freedom of being authentically yourself, and it's in that space where you begin to understand something profound, the deepest, most meaningful. Bonds are not those that promise the most, but those that honor each other's evolution. That level of connection can only arise once you've walked through your own personal transformation. You face your old self, embraced it, and lovingly released it, not out of rejection, but with understanding. You finally see that your past version wasn't wrong or broken. It was simply trying to protect you the only way it knew how. But now that protection is no longer necessary, you no longer need to hide behind a character or wear a mask just to feel worthy of love. You've stopped striving to be accepted. Now you simply are. And that is enough. Without effort, without seeking approval, your essence begins to radiate more purely than ever before. And in that purity, you discover a new kind of intimacy. It's not about sharing every wound or narrating your journey in detail. It's about allowing yourself to be seen as you are right now, without decoration, without pretense. You no longer carry the weight of old disguises. It no longer offends you to be misunderstood. It doesn't wound you like before to be overlooked or left behind. That's because the source of your value no longer resides in the eyes of others. It lives within the relationship you've built with yourself, a relationship that was born out of silence, out of lonely nights where you chose not to fall back into old patterns, out of days when you decided to hold yourself together even when nothing else was holding you from that deep root. Your old self gently steps away, not because you banish it, but because it no longer resonates with your current frequency. You can look back and honor that version of you as part of your story, recognizing that it did the best it could with what it knew, with what it had, and with what it believed was necessary to survive. But you're no longer surviving, you're creating. And in this state of conscious creation, there's no room left for the rigid structures of the past. Now there is space for softness, for subtlety, for that which vibrates without needing to shout. Your soul no longer needs to impress, defend, or prove its light. It simply inhabits it. And from that space, every relationship that remains or enters your life becomes a reflection of this new state of being. A state where love no longer feels like a burden, but a support that doesn't invade, where sharing doesn't stem from lack, but from fullness, where choosing someone or something isn't about clinging, but about honoring what aligns with who you are now. Your vision of life shifts in a way that can't be undone. You stop perceiving things the way you used to. What once looked unfair to you now reveals itself as part of a bigger design. What you once labeled as mistakes are now recognized as crucial moments of growth and transformation. You no longer speak to yourself as a victim, your consciousness has expanded enough to recognize that even the most painful moments carried a greater purpose beyond the suffering. Transcending your old self doesn't just mean healing your wounds. It means seeing from a higher vantage point, not because it makes you feel better, but because your soul can no longer look through the same lens. You've elevated internally, and that inner elevation allows you to perceive what once felt like chaos as hidden order, as silent teachings, as coded messages waiting to be understood. Even your relationship with time begins to shift. You no longer live in a constant state of waiting. You don't chase after what slips away, nor do you insist that everything must happen now. You start to live in harmony with the natural rhythm of your soul, a rhythm that isn't rushed by external pressures, but guided by inner maturity. In this rhythm, everything flows differently. Your priorities reorganize. What once seemed so important now fades, and the things you once overlooked now feel sacred. You begin to value silence. You revere the pause. You trust the process, even when you don't understand. Every step, you no longer need guarantees to move forward. You just need to feel aligned, and that's enough. Because now you know the soul doesn't need to understand everything to keep going. It just needs to be in tune with what resonates as truth. This alignment with your truth becomes your compass. You stop making decisions from fear of making mistakes. You stop living from the urgency of fulfilling other people's expectations. Your choices are no longer reactions to a painful past. They're quiet acts of honoring your present. And that simple but powerful shift changes everything about how you experience life. You no longer force meaning out of every situation. You've learned that true understanding often arrives only after you've let go. And with that level of energetic maturity, you stop trying to control everything. You release the need to demand answers from life in the moment. You begin to live with more softness. And that softness doesn't mean weakness or passivity. It means power refined and silent. Your strength becomes something inward and unwavering. You no longer feel compelled to showcase your process or prove your transformation to anyone. Your most honest silence speaks more than words ever could. And that changes how you walk through the world. You begin to move through your days with more awareness. The smallest moments, the brief pauses, the subtle gestures begin to feel meaningful. You're no longer chasing the next accomplishment, nor measuring your growth by what's visible to others. Now you measure it by what you feel when you wake up in the morning, by the calm you sense when you're alone, by the peace that hums inside you, even when everything around you is moving. Transcending the old self means stepping beyond the limited identity you once clung to, living from a higher plane of perception without ever needing to leave your body. It's inhabiting a new frequency, a different state of being without escaping from the world. It is no longer about reacting to what life throws at you, but about consciously choosing how you want to experience your reality. This conscious choice becomes the seed transformation. It shifts the way you relate to every single part of your existence. What used to feel like a burden can now become an opportunity to be fully present. What once drained you now dissolves quietly and gently, without resistance, without resentment. And though this transformation may not be immediately visible to others, it is deep, enduring, and powerful, because now you no longer rely on your circumstances to feel peace. Your inner peace is no longer dependent on whether things go your way or not. It flows from how faithfully you are living in alignment with your true self. And that inner fidelity, it's non-negotiable. It becomes your anchor, your center, your guiding truth. The old self measured its worth through goals achieved, through the approval of others, through applause and external validation. But you're no longer chasing. After those illusions, you've discovered that true fulfillment doesn't come with noise. It reveals itself quietly in the rhythm of your breath, in the way you choose your words, in the calm dignity with which you walk away from anything that no longer nourishes your soul. Without causing harm or conflict, you begin to view challenges differently. They're no longer punishments or obstacles meant to break you. They are thresholds, gateways that your soul must pass through in order to awaken the dormant parts of you. You stop running from them, you face them with the inner, knowing that they're not here to destroy you, but to unveil you. And that shift changes your energy at the most fundamental level. Your vibration no longer emits fear or doubt. It radiates truth, a truth that needs no defense, that speaks for itself in your eyes, your presence, your stillness. And it is in that moment of inner clarity that you realize the most significant change did not happen outside of you. It happened within you. The deepest transformation was never about rearranging your environment. It was about seeing life through the lens of your awakened soul, no longer through the filter of a self that needed fixing, proving, or pleasing. From that place of awakening, the ordinary becomes sacred, not because the world has changed, but because your perception is no longer tinted by lack or fear. Your gaze softens, it expands, it becomes filled with gratitude. You no longer need divine signs to believe, nor absolute certainty to move forward. You start walking with a slower inner rhythm, not because you've slowed down externally, but because you're no longer chasing things that were never meant for you. You grant yourself the freedom to choose differently, even if no one understands. You give yourself permission to not have all the answers, to not be in control, to leave space for the mystery to unfold itself, because you now trust that life is working with you, not against you. And in that sacred space, everything begins to align, not because you're doing more, but because you're resisting less. Your vibration becomes a magnet, attracting only what resonates with who you've become. You no longer need to force, to hold on, or to push. What is meant for you stays. What isn't simply fades away peacefully and without drama. Even the difficulties that show up begin to take on a new shape. They don't vanish, but they no longer shatter you like they once did, because you're not approaching them from the same wounded version of yourself. You now face them with a depth that doesn't need immediate answers, but seeks true understanding, with a maturity that doesn't aim to win, but to stay in alignment. You meet life not with urgency, but with presence. You stop striving to be someone and start embodying who you truly are. And in that embodiment, everything changes. Not suddenly, not loudly, but completely. And that, though no one else may see it, changes absolutely everything. Because when your energy aligns with your truth, your reality begins to respond in kind. No chaos, no struggle. Just synchronicity, just clarity, just that quiet whisper within you that speaks without words, that reminds you effortlessly of what you've always known. You're no longer who you used to be. You've transcended, and that transcendence doesn't announce itself. It is embodied, felt in silence, recognized only by the depth of your presence. There's no exact moment when it all clicks, no marked point of arrival. One day, you simply notice you don't react the same way. The things that used to hurt you now barely reach. You no longer move through life, driven by the urgency that once dictated your inner world. You've changed, not on the surface, but at the root. And that kind of change runs so deep, it doesn't need a name to be real. You feel it in how you carry yourself, in how you choose peace over performance. It shows in your ability to sit in silence, without anxiety, to welcome uncertainty, without losing your center, to live from what's essential without dressing it up. Your energy no longer scatters in 1,000 directions. It consolidates, it aligns, it becomes a current, one that moves not from pressure or expectation, but from a source within you that has no name and needs no explanation. This source, this guidance, comes from a connection to something deeper than your identity, your labels, your story. You no longer exist to maintain an image. You exist to express an essence that has always been with you, waiting patiently while you were busy chasing, proving, surviving, waiting for you to stop orbiting the same distractions. And you let go. You chose differently. You walked forward, and without even realizing it, you transcended, not as an achievement, but as a natural outcome of choosing honesty over habit, of staying true to yourself when silence was harder than noise, of standing by your soul when turning back would have been easier. Now that old version of you is no longer in control, and in its place stands someone real, someone calmer, someone more you than you've ever been. From this place of authenticity, a new chapter begins. Not one where you react, but one where you respond with presence. You no longer chase approval because you've remembered your own worth simply by existing. You no longer seek belonging because your soul has remembered its eternal home was always within you. Life is no longer a race. It becomes a sacred unfolding, not because everything is perfect, but because you've stopped resisting what isn't. You welcome each moment not with resignation, but with a peace that comes from reconciliation with the now. Your days are no longer a cycle of repetition. They become a living expression of your new frequency. Each word you speak, each gaze you offer, each step you take carries the imprint of someone who has chosen to live from their center. And that imprint, though invisible, leaves an undeniable impact, because a soul that has transcended its former self doesn't need to move mountains to transform the world. Its very presence is healing. It's a silent medicine, a reminder that living in alignment is not only possible, it is powerful. It shows others that healing is not a myth, that letting go doesn't mean forgetting, that becoming doesn't mean rejecting who you were. It means honoring the journey, understanding that every step prepared you for this one, this moment, this now, and now that. You're here, your vibration speaks for you, and the world responds. If you felt this message resonates somewhere deep inside you, it's not a coincidence. Your soul already knew. It was simply waiting for you to remember yourself. Because transcending the old self is not an ending, it is a beginning where you finally return to yourself fully, without fear, without masks, without weight. Carl Jung once said that enlightenment doesn't come from imagining figures of light, but from making the darkness conscious. And in those few words lies a truth that most people spend a lifetime avoiding, because facing your darkness, acknowledging your shadow, is one of the most terrifying and liberating experiences a human being can endure. It's not a poetic metaphor, it's a raw, sometimes painful process of peeling back the layers of who you thought you were, only to meet the parts of yourself you tried so hard to ignore, suppress, or deny. And yet, if you're listening to this now, it's because something inside you has already shifted. You've crossed that invisible threshold where you no longer fear the dark corners of your mind. You've chosen to stop running. You've dared to look inward, to confront the wounds, the memories, the patterns, and the emotions that once held power over you. That is not a small step. That is the beginning of true transformation. You see, the shadow isn't something to be destroyed or erased. It's not your enemy. It is a part of you that has been waiting, often in silence, for your acceptance, for your love. Making the darkness conscious means learning to see it, to name it, and ultimately to integrate it. And when you do that, something incredible happens, the very parts of you that once felt broken become the source of your deepest wisdom. The pain becomes a teacher, the fear becomes a compass. The chaos, a doorway to clarity. You've walked that path. You've taken your shadow by the hand and said, I see you. I know you're there and I'm ready to listen. That takes courage. That takes strength. And it's a journey most people avoid their entire lives. But you didn't. You made your shadow a bridge instead of a burden. And now you move through the world from a place that feels more grounded, more truthful, more real. And if in some way this space has been a companion for you on that journey, if the words you found here have echoed something ancient and familiar within your soul, then know this. You're not walking alone. You're part of something much greater, something that transcends language and time. It's a collective awakening, shared remembering. There are others just like you stepping out of illusion and into authenticity, choosing presence over perfection, choosing wholeness over avoidance. So if your heart feels called to keep exploring, to keep shedding the false and embracing the true, then walk with us. Keep going, because every step you take inward echoes outward. Every time you choose truth over comfort, darkness over denial, light is born. Not imagined, not forced, but naturally revealed. You are not who you were, and you are not alone. And if these words have stirred something within you, if you feel that this journey resonates with the quiet truth you carry deep inside, then I invite you to stay close.
This space was created for souls like yours.
For those who are ready to walk a different path, one of depth, presence, and inner clarity. So if you haven't already, take a moment to subscribe, not just to a channel, but to a movement of consciousness. Because each video, each reflection, each moment we share here is meant to support your journey and remind you of who you truly are beneath all the noise. Subscribe, and let's keep walking this path.